Don't worry. America is looking at the wrong enemy. After the war, Japan fought the U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur. Japan's past war, not wars of aggression. I testified that it was for security. America is the country grew by expansion, westward expansion. Remember the Alamo Fort, in the slogan, the war with Mexico, got a vast land in the west. Remember the main issue, in the slogan, started a war with Spain. Cuba, Puerto Rico, want to pick up, armed annex Hawaii. The war is done in the Philippines Spanish territory. Filipino independence movement against the American cause. The oppression, 20 million people died. America, and a thorough brainwashing for Filipinos. Filipino culture moved to discarded. American spirit. Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Guam, the Philippines, and promote territorial expansion. America is the land while having a huge desire to acquire territories directed to Asia. Thus the United States finally came to China's. However, China hopes to at the time, there was another country. Territory was expanded to Eurasia, Russia. Russia is pursuing a policy softening region-occupied Manchuria. Korea began to interfere further. 4091 year, we are alarmed by Japan. The Russo-Japanese War broke out. It was a major event for the first time when the world colored whites. After the war, southern Sakhalin, and Japan, Liaodong Peninsula, the South Manchuria Railway Reich Machida again. Against this backdrop, the Japanese government of the United States Harriman Railroad King, Shikake Machida business partners in Japan and the United States trying to South Manchuria Railway. For this proposal, Jutaro Komura, they got right, and not imitate sell abroad. Japan has rejected the proposal Harriman. This event was the turning point of history.
Yesterday, United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Japan and the U.S. War started and I suddenly have an attack on Pearl Harbor. It's not. You know things have been unabashed in Japan. America cannot understand why you began the war. Since the Russo-Japanese War, Japan defeated the United States saw white, burned to fear. In addition, rehearsed newspapers to increase sales, the Japanese captured the threat without any evidence, theory Mashita effect. The more spread persecution of Japanese immigrants in America. Anti-Japanese riots that occurred during a major earthquake in San Francisco, received a Japanese immigrant beating looting. America, which has proposed a strategy plan in the year 6091 range. It was incorporated to take over the Japanese people and burned indiscriminately slaughter in Japan. Furthermore, the United States causes anti-Japanese immigration laws enacted racism exposed. Japanese immigration naturalization was not observed. Even land also has been stripped of their rights. Japan's post-World War I introduced a bill to abolish racial discrimination in the League of Nations. However, U.S.
friendly fire.
President Wilson, I have already rejected the world's first racial equality and advocated for Japan. It was America's crushed. Furthermore, the United States, I will be eliminating the Anglo-Japanese alliance. Japan, due to China's repeated trick, but you will get caught in the Sino-Japanese War. We strive to bring peace to Japan many times. However, in the background during the Daikon in the war, Soviet Union and as the incitement of anti-Japanese movement in China had in bad faith in America. In other words, the Soviet Union, I was induced the U.S. Sino-Japanese War. Japan and the United States undermined the Sino-Japanese War, and we tried to China with Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang. Japan beat the United States because, using the chaos of China, raised fueled anti-Japanese propaganda unchained. The Soviet Union, China was weakened by the war during the day. I was aiming to communism. At that time, Chinese communist troops had been driven to the Kuomintang army. Communist forces are pulling the Japanese army in China in the Civil War. The reconstruction is measured while the communist forces. The Chinese diplomat in China, even if the real explanation, because otherwise President Franklin Roosevelt had a romantic illusions to China. Chiang Kai-shek, the Japanese army slaughtered Zanamaske crinkles yourself civilians occurred, scatter in the United States fabricated picture. And re-questioned Gamashita anti-Japanese propaganda. Associate with a famous photograph was evidence of violence are made by Japanese nationalist Chiang Kai-shek. Madame Chiang Kai old beauty plays king of the Christians, showed Japan's crying in the United States through tyranny. Democratic leader Chiang Kai-shek, the Japanese troops were being built up is the notion of violence to Americans. And U.S. military supplies to Chiang Kai-shek enormous. And the continued support of the weapon. American public opinion is fairly accidentally seeing the identity of the Chiang Kai-shek. The KMT has been tricked out too. Financial support for Chiang Kai-shek was a short war. If you look at the world situation at that time, Japan is not a threat. Invasion of communism did. Recognizing that threats to the world plunge into the expansion of communism, and to compete, it was only in Japan. Communists of the Soviet Union, I was trying to aim communism in China. America, however, was hostile to Japan as China's failure to advance. Was also radio, movies, news. I was reporting on the anti-Japanese feelings. President Franklin E. Roosevelt in an anti-Japanese principle, I believe the wicked and the evil empire that conspiring to conquer the world of the Japanese. President Roosevelt, the war decided to strike the Japanese too. Actually at that time, the International Communist Organization in the Soviet Union ignited the US-Japan. I was involved in a Comintern conspiracy. We fight together the world's great powers, was aimed at weakening the war, revolution, the Comintern that communism is a conspiracy. Roosevelt to Soviet communism, if what you want like Stalin, and the United States would not interfere with invasion, had a sweet illusion. The heart of the Roosevelt administration is a network of secret maneuvers had been the Soviets, but at this time America was totally indifferent to the expansion of communism. I did not understand the threat of communism. U.S. Japan to seal the coalition economic sanctions made it. In addition, the U.S. has frozen the assets of the Japanese question. As full oil embargo, Japan has been stymied. All our part of the plan was orange. The Japanese side, if they can solve the siege, even withdrawal from mainland China, the open or equal opportunities were also available. But Roosevelt did not come into play in discussions. Call the ambassador suddenly, that Hironoto has been called the unilateral notice requirements. Hironoto request has been submitted to the U.S. was a hopeless mess. Apt encirclement not solve all of the requests you drink in Japan is not. After the war, the trial judge in the Indian Pearl Tokyo, when something like Hironoto poses, even small countries like Luxembourg and Monaco, the United States would take a spear tackle. If yours is drinking an armed request rather than waiting to die sitting, helpless. Roosevelt, I was provoked to attack Pearl Harbor to Japan before. Remember Pearl Harbor, under the slogan, suddenly we seem to verge of war in Japan, they drove to the war of public opinion. The United States, by President Roosevelt, is crafted to attack the country. But in fact the American people did not know there's no Hironoto. Hironoto convinced the war in Japan, where even no U.S. Congress, it was in Japan where they crashed. This is Hironoto, who wrote the Secretary of State. Hell, it is not. Hironoto wrote the manuscript. A man named Harry White, Assistant Treasury, he was a spy for the Soviet Union that has become apparent. After the war, Comintern was erased, underwent a sudden death. Hironoto background, causing Japan war, there was a conspiracy to revolutionize the Comintern and the communists. It later, General Douglas MacArthur, with such attitudes in America, the United States was wrong to look at world affairs. The biggest mistake committed in the past, the United States, said the brothers, that was communism. The trial lasted 5 years. Americans did not allow this cheeky monkey yellow. In the indiscriminate bombing of Japanese cities, and a total of about 600 million people killed civilians. Refused to escape the fireball, burned in around 6 to 5 kilometers in diameter in a raid, the massacre of civilians, and dropped countless bombs rain inside. America, a total of about 30 million people killed civilians from 2 atomic bombs dropped. Human testing is performed against the Japanese. The Holocaust was unprecedented genocide. Ritchie in Japan GHQ, opened the Tokyo court. Metsu conducted a war of aggression, and the Japanese villain, having been judged for granted that the losers were crimes against peace, the leaders were executed as war criminals under strict control of information. The Tokyo trial is American justice. Japanese history is brainwashing, implicating masochistic view of history with a history of aggression. But in fact the U.S. is fighting the U.S.-Japan war. I did not get anything big, just to crack the national interest. America at that time had a strong fondness for second Western China. China had wanted to become was a good partner. Chiang Kai-shek's good people who appeal to American public opinion will play a Christian. America, the Chiang Kai-shek, just a seeker of power, convinced I had a democratic leader. In accordance with this delusion, the Chiang Kai-shek school in Tang America helped a lot of food, but also in the arms of gold. They, however, is the Chiang Kai-shek had been ripped off everything. America is asking the Chinese market was war with Japan. But at last, after the Japanese retreat, Mao Zedong defeated Chiang Kai-shek in fight. I fled to Taiwan. Chinese communism has been, ironically, I have teamed up with the Soviet Union to be hostile. After all, America was I supposed to be fooled by Chiang Kai-shek. I want to be able to China, but rewarded to the United States. This was a major miscalculation of the United States. In addition, the United States for the Soviet Union to crush Japan higher Mashita. For the United States than in Japan, but that should have been more Soviet threat. Also in the Korean War, even the Vietnam War, the Soviet Union was behind. America is the Soviet Union had to suffer long. America was a major miscalculation, was a friend to the Soviet Union. And the Korean War broke out? Was assisting the North Korean military. It was the Soviet Union and China. China is the enemy of America stood in turn. For the US was shocked and extremely disappointed. MacArthur? The communist forces from the Korean Peninsula, the North 83 and Shimashita degree line up. Finally, I issue the American casualties of more than the United States. Why MacArthur? The Korean War? What was so tough? It is the enemy North Korean groups were from mainland China and the Soviet military forces were. First time fighting the Korean War, General MacArthur was faced with the threat of communist troops. Now for the Korean Peninsula is communism, then communism would next of Japan is a matter of time. At this time MacArthur was stuck to a clear understanding of Japan's position in Manchuria and Korea. Korean Peninsula in Manchuria is a bulwark to protect Japan from communism. MacArthur returned home in the U.S. Congress was asked to testify about what he thinks of the former Japanese war. MacArthur in his speech emphasized the right of self-Japan. Japan solved the need to be armed. China's foray into Japan is not a war of aggression, and had testified for the defense. This is the word comes from the feeling of a MacArthur led the Korean War. MacArthur is to the bone when Shimida have experienced threats from the Korean War. Japan's position once stood. War with Japan is clearly understood that it was a war of self-defense. America is wrong for someone looking at the real enemy. Suki-era country with responsibility and trust in Asia and era, that it was Japan. At this time, American attitudes toward Japan is amended. Japanese people have historically had operated properly parliament and elections. I realize this is America. We are now allied with Japan. America and Japan signed a security treaty. Japan's heavy industry and allow aid to industry in Japan is grown. This is Japan. Seized the opportunity was for the reconstruction.